What is up, everybody? It is JT Sports. I'm back to you guys with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'm recording this episode really early than what I normally record. I normally record these episodes like late in the afternoon, like around 5 or 6 o'clock. But I'm up early. It's 10 o'clock in the morning, trying to get these last couple of podcast episodes in before I go back to college this upcoming Friday, which is only like 2 days away. So on this episode, I'm going to be previewing some more week 2 NFL preseason matchups. We got the Ravens and the Panthers, the Falcons taking on the Miami Dolphins, Indianapolis versus Minnesota, and the Jacksonville Jaguars taking on the New Orleans Saints. So if you are a first-time listener of the podcast and you're new, make sure that you go ahead, leave a 5-star review on the podcast. Also, make sure that you follow me on my social media pages. My Instagram and Twitter is both JT_. Once again, you can follow me on my Instagram and Twitter pages, which are JT_. And lastly, make sure that you are subscribed to my YouTube channel, which is JT Sports. The first game that we have to talk about on this episode are the Baltimore Ravens taking on the Carolina Panthers. Now, Baltimore defeated the Saints last week 17-14, and Carolina was defeated by the Indianapolis Colts 18-21. Now, when you watched the Ravens last week, obviously something that was on full display was how much talent and depth that they have at the secondary. Cornerback and safety is incredibly deep for Baltimore. As a matter of fact, you probably could say that Baltimore has the best safety and cornerback position groups in the whole entire NFL. You had Geno Stone, who had 2 interceptions. You have Sean Wade, who had the game-winning interception against Ian Book. You also have Brandon Stephens, Chris Westry, Darius Washington, an undrafted rookie free agent, who also performed really good. So their whole entire secondary is incredibly deep, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they do against the Carolina Panthers wide receiving core, which the Carolina Panthers, their best receiver from last game, in my opinion, was Terrace Marshall. Terrace Marshall had a really nice showing in his first ever NFL game. Not officially, since this is the preseason. It's more like an exhibition, but it was really good to see what Terrace Marshall was able to do. I have been really high on Terrace Marshall. I think that he could have a pretty solid rookie season for the Carolina Panthers. He had a nice little touchdown where P.J. Walker was able to scramble outside the pocket and was able to extend the play and get the ball out to Terrace Marshall. So Terrace Marshall had a really good performance last week against Indianapolis, and he's definitely going to be tested against a really good Baltimore secondary. Now, for the Ravens, you also have a backup quarterback battle that's going on between Tyler Huntley and Trace McSorley. Now, I think that Tyler Huntley, from last week's performance, I think that he has to probably be in the league. He was 12 of 16 for 79 passing yards. He also had 43 rushing yards on 7 carries, and he also had a rushing touchdown as well. Now, Trace McSorley didn't play bad. He was 11 of 18, 86 passing yards, but he did throw an interception, but he ran for 25 rushing yards also. I just think that Trace McSorley, the offense didn't run as smooth under him when he was at the helm at quarterback compared to how it ran under Tyler Huntley. When Tyler Huntley was at quarterback, the offense was a little bit more efficient compared to when Trace McSorley was in there. So I think that Tyler Huntley definitely is in the league right now when it comes to that backup quarterback battle behind Lamar Jackson. And also, I think that Tyler Huntley is a way more explosive runner compared to Trace McSorley. Like, when you watch Tyler Huntley run, like, you would think that you would be seeing another version of Lamar Jackson, because this guy is incredibly explosive in his own right. Now, you know, he doesn't have that acceleration that Lamar Jackson has, but if you didn't know who these two guys were and they both had the same jersey number, I see a lot of, you know, similar characteristics in terms of how those two quarterbacks run. Like, they're very explosive. Now, as we all know, Lamar Jackson is way more faster, but when I watch Tyler Huntley run, man, like, I definitely see a lot of similarities to Lamar Jackson's running style. So it's still really interesting to keep tabs on this because we don't know if Baltimore is going to keep 3 quarterbacks on the roster. They could keep 2, but I could also see them keeping 3 in case, unfortunately, you got to have like a COVID relief quarterback. Now, the offensive line had their ups and downs. I think that it struggled for the most part last week. It's interesting to see what this offensive line does against Carolina because the offensive line didn't really have a couple of key starters. Ronnie Stanley didn't play, Kevin Zeitler didn't play, and neither did Ben Cleveland. He also didn't participate in last week's preseason matchup. So if those guys do play in this game, I want to see the improvement from the offensive line because the offensive line wasn't all that great, which I think is a big reason why the quarterbacks didn't have, the great production that we're looking for when it comes to that backup job. So I think if the offensive line can improve, we should see the quarterback play improve also along with the running game. Now, for Carolina, I had a couple of Panthers fans ask me this on Twitter and Instagram. Make sure that you go ahead and you follow me on those. My link to my Twitter and Instagram is down in the description down below, JT Sports _. But I had a Panthers fan ask me in the comment section of one of my videos also, is PJ Walker better than Sam Darnold? Now, PJ Walker had a pretty nice performance against Indianapolis last week. He was 10 of 21, 161 passing yards and a touchdown. He was able to get outside the pocket and extend plays. He looked really solid, but I wouldn't go as far to say as him being better than Sam Darnold. I still think Sam Darnold is the better option right now, and I still think he's the best quarterback on the team due to the fact that I think he's a little bit more accurate, and I think that he's a little bit more polished than PJ Walker. With PJ Walker, we definitely saw some really good plays. We saw some brilliance there when he was able to extend the play, step up in the pocket when the pocket was collapsing, move out like we saw. He was outside that pocket when he threw that pass to Terrence Marshall, which went for a lot of yards. So when I look at PJ Walker as of right now, I just see him as a really good backup quarterback. I don't really know right now if he's better than Sam Darnold. And a lot of you Panthers fans got to understand that you're saying this based off one preseason game. Okay, for all we know, PJ Walker could play terrible for the next 2 preseason games. So it's a little bit too early to be coming out here making these statements that PJ Walker is better than Sam Darnold, or is he not? Could he be challenging Sam Darnold? Like, we know that Sam Darnold is going to be the guy come week 1. So a lot of people, when it comes to these week 1 preseason games, they tend to get a little bit too excited, and you haven't watched football in a very long time. So of course you're going to be really excited when you have a player on your team that performs really well, but you have to take everything with a grain of salt. It's the only preseason game that PJ Walker has played in so far. He did play last season, but he had a pretty good game, but he definitely could have played a little bit better. He had some really big incompletions. Like, he had one completion that could have went for a touchdown that he overthrew. So overall, I think PJ Walker had a really solid game, but I think for right now, I just view him more as a backup option. Now, I'm not saying that he can't, change. He could end up being a really good starter for Carolina if they need him to step up, if he continues to play well. But for right now, I'm not going to say that PJ Walker is better than Sam Darnold based on 1 week of preseason action. I just need to see more. The Panthers' pass rush rotation was really impressive last game. Marquise Hayes, Gross Matus both had the sack. They both look really impressive. Baltimore's offensive line struggled last week, and Carolina's pass rush was really impressive last week. So I want to see, is the offensive line for Baltimore going to continue to struggle in this game? And is Carolina going to continue to flourish in that department? Or, is Baltimore's offensive line play going to improve? Or are they going to kind of try to neutralize the pass rush of Carolina? They have some pretty good depth there. Now, my players to watch for both these two teams. For Carolina, I keep my eye out on rookie halfback Chuba Hubbard. I don't know why people keep calling him Chuba Hubbard or Chuba Hubbard. Like, keep mispronouncing his name. It's Chuba Hubbard, but he had a really, really good game last week. 7 carries 80 rushing yards. He was really impressive. We definitely saw the explosiveness. And last season, we didn't really see the Chuba Hubbard that we saw back in 2019. He was kind of battling injuries for Oklahoma State last year. So when we saw him fully healthy for the first time last week, he was impressive. Now, he's definitely going to be Chris McCaffrey's backup. You lost Mike Davis. You're looking for a backup option there. And when Chris McCaffrey needs a break or he needs a breather, Chuba Hubbard is going to be the guy to step in. I also like what I saw out of rookie tight end Tommy Tremble. He had 3 catches for 19 yards and a touchdown. I was really impressed with what I saw out of him. Justice Hill. I am still waiting to see Justice Hill have a good performance. I've yet to see anything really spectacular out of Justice Hill. And remind you, a lot of Ravens fans, when he was drafted a couple of years ago, were saying, oh, JT, he's going to be the change of pace back. You're tripping. Because I thought the Justice Hill pick wasn't a great selection because I didn't really think he meshed with what Baltimore wanted to do when it came to running the football. Normally they have power backs who can run in between the tackles. Just Hill's more of, a zone run, more of a running back that you want to get outside more. So for Justice Hill, he didn't really do anything last game. He had 5 carries for 8 rushing yards. So I'm still looking for Justice Hill to show me something because I think there's a very good chance that we could see Justice Hill not make the final 53-man roster. Now, Geno Stone was a really great player for Baltimore last week. 2 interceptions. He caught an interception against both Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. So I was really impressed with him. I was really impressed with his man cover skills. If there was, like Team of the Week awards giving out to, players of the week for, like certain teams, you definitely should have Geno Stone in that conversation because he probably had the best showcase for any cornerback that participated in the rookie season, participated in the preseason last week. So I was really impressed with him. Edge rusher Jalen Ferguson, I think he had a pretty nice game. I want to see what he does in this game as well, going against the Carolina Panthers offensive line that's still trying to find themselves. And I think Jalen Ferguson could end up having a breakout season this year for the Baltimore Ravens. So this is it for my Baltimore Ravens versus Carolina Panthers Week 2 NFL preseason preview. Let me know some players that you're going to be watching, some things that you're going to be watching down in the comment section down below. Before I move on, let me get a quick drink of water real quick. Like, for some reason, every time I'm recording an episode, like, my lips get really dry, and I don't really understand it, because, like, I put chapstick on, but even though I put on chapstick, my lips still get kind of dry when I'm recording this, so gotta take a little bit of a water break. But the next matchup that we have to talk about, we have the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Miami Dolphins. Now, Atlanta, I don't know what the hell that was last week against Tennessee, but it was pitiful. The defense sucked and the offense sucked. The Dolphins lost to the Chicago Bears 13-20. Now, for Atlanta, man, like, how is this offense going to look in this game? And I know a lot of you guys are going to say it's the preseason, it's just one game, it's the first game, you can't really overreact. So I'm not overreacting. I just want to see, is this offense going to continue to struggle? Because if the offense continues to struggle, then that tells me one or two things. One, there's not a lot of depth there. And 2, you have problems that need to be dramatically solved right away, because if one of your starters goes down, then you don't really have that great depth. And part of being able to be a good team in this day and age in the NFL is being able to have great depth, being able to have guys who can step up. I was really disappointed with how the wide receivers performed last week for Atlanta. The offensive line really let them down. The offensive line was bad against the run and the pass. Now, I'm not quite sure if they had their whole entire offensive line starting in that game, but it doesn't really matter, because at the end of the day, like, they didn't give any of the quarterbacks for Atlanta any time to throw the football. A.J. McCarron and Felipe Franks, and the run blocking was abysmal. That they allowed 5 sacks and 2.9 yards per rush. So I was really disappointed with the Falcons offense, but I'm not going to beat them over the head about it. It was only the first preseason game, so hopefully they should be able to improve in this game. And it's not even hopefully, like, as a Falcons fan, you're saying in your head, okay, you better improve, you better have a better showing than what we saw last week. Like, the offensive line was terrible, man. And the quarterback play wasn't good neither. A.J. McCarron and Felipe Franks don't look like valuable backup options. It looks like you might need to go ahead and, give me a phone call, give me a little ring. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be a great backup quarterback, anything like that, but I definitely feel like I can perform better than what A.J. McCarron did and Felipe Franks did last week. But if those guys continue to struggle, then maybe you have to think about trading for a Gardner Minshew, who you could really use, because you don't really have a great backup quarterback situation right now, and you're only as good as your weakest link. So I think that, in this game, as a Falcons fan, if your backup quarterbacks continue to struggle, then you may need to think about looking at a possible trade if you are the front office in Atlanta. Now, the secondary still struggled. How will it improve against a really deep receiving core of Miami? Miami has a lot of depth and a lot of talent at wide receiver. So I think that this is going to be a really good test to see how far along that secondary is for the Atlanta Falcons. Now, Richie Grant had like an up and down performance. He had some good plays, but he also had a couple of plays where, he kind of got outplayed for the ball, So I want to see how he performs. I think his preseason debut last week wasn't bad. I think it was solid, but, he definitely had some downs, but he also had a good amount of ups as well. So I want to see how he's going to look in this game. The Dolphins offensive line, they played okay against the Chicago Bears. You did have some guys who had some penalties there. You had some false starts. But in all honesty, I think the offensive line definitely looks a tad bit better this season, at least from last week against Chicago, than what it did last season. Now, Tua Tagovailoa was really impressive. He went 8 of 11 for 99 passing yards. He had a really good drive, but, it got derailed when he ended up throwing an interception. And, of course, Twitter only talked about that. But if you take the interception away from the equation, I think Tua looked really good. Like, I saw Tua that looked really confident. He didn't look shy. He wasn't afraid to, attack the field down deep. And that's something that I saw out of Tua last year. He looked kind of timid. He looked kind of scared. And not scared as the sense, he was just gunshot, anything like that, like he was Sam Darnold, like he was seeing ghosts. But I just saw a quarterback that was a little bit afraid to throw the football downfield. So I saw a more confident Tua in this game, and I'm hoping to see him continue to impress throughout preseason, because, he kind of struggled during OTAs. He's been pretty solid during training camp for the most part. He's had his ups and downs, but that's the part of the training camp grind. You're not going to have great days day in and day out. You're going to have some down performances. So I felt like Tua definitely needed to come out and have a really strong preseason showing. He also needs to do the same thing against a Falcons secondary right now that still doesn't really look all that improved to me. Now, Noah Igbinoghene, remember him? He was drafted in the first round of last year's draft out of Auburn. He got a good amount of playing time as a rookie last year, but he pretty much struggled in the majority of games that he got significant amount of snaps. But he looked pretty solid last week against Chicago. Now, Chicago didn't really have any wide receivers to, write home about that we should be afraid of. But I think that it was really good to see Noah Igbinoghene have a good game coming off a, letdown of a rookie season. So the players I'm going to be watching for both these two teams, for Atlanta, I'm going to be watching rookie safety Richie Grant. Like I said earlier, I felt like he had an okay game. He had some ups, he had some downs, he had some plays that he was really good. He also had some plays that he got beat that I felt like he could have been putting himself in a better situation. I'm also watching rookie halfback Javian Hawkins. Hopefully we see more of him in this game. We didn't really get to see what he could do because the offensive line wasn't really giving any running lanes to, for the running backs to work with. So for Javian Hawkins, I want to see what he does. Hopefully he can actually have some competent run blocking in this game, and we can actually see him have a fair chance to show he can do, because a lot of Falcons fans were really high on him coming out of Louisville in the draft. I'm really high on Zacchaeus. Okay, and I still want to see what he's going to do. Didn't really see him last week the quarterbacks didn't really have any time to throw the football to the wide receivers or anything. So I want to see what he's going to do in this matchup. Felipe Franks. Felipe Franks had the longest play of the game for the Falcons when he had that big rush that went for a lot of yards, and he was their leading rusher, 76 rushing yards on 4 carries. But as a passer, he didn't really look all that polished. He was 2 of 9 for 16 yards passing. So for him, he has a opportunity to win that backup quarterback job right now, because I thought A.J. McCarron, being a seasoned veteran that he was, having, experience being a starting quarterback for a brief stretch there in Cincinnati when Andy Dalton was injured a couple of years ago. I thought A.J. McCarron would play a little bit better. So I think that it's definitely Felipe Franks' job to take if he has the opportunity to do so, because A.J. McCarron doesn't really look like, the clear-cut backup quarterback behind Matt Ryan that I thought he would. So I think that Felipe comes out and has a good game, and A.J. McCarron has another game that he struggles, then I think Felipe Franks definitely could end up becoming the backup quarterback. And before the preseason even started, I was looking at Felipe Franks as a guy that a lot of Falcons fans definitely can't overlook. He has a really strong arm. As we saw, he has a lot of athleticism. He has more athleticism than what A.J. McCarron had. So for Felipe Franks, I definitely think that this is a prime opportunity for him. If he's able to come out and have a really good game, he could end up, maybe being a front runner for that backup quarterback gig. Now for Miami, I was really impressed with wide receiver Lynn Bolden going into his second season in the NFL. Last year, he was he was swapped. He was traded to Miami, I believe, by the Raiders. It was really weird. And he had a really nice game. He had 4 catches for 47 receiving yards. And when you look at Lynn Bolden, he's like a do-it-all person. You can line him up in different, positions on the offense. He can play a little bit of quarterback in the Wildcat, running back as well, slot receiver, outside receiver. I was really impressed with how he performed last week. I want to see what linebacker Shaquem Griffin does. I forgot that they had signed Shaquem Griffin a couple of weeks ago, so I'm going to be keeping my eyes out on him. I want to see how he does in coverage. He has pretty good speed. He has pretty good instincts to the ball. It's just all about, can he be coached up properly? He's definitely a linebacker that Brian Flores kind of likes. He has that good speed. He does have that coverage ability. He is able to do a little bit of different things. So he definitely fits what Brian Flores wants to do defensively. Salvon Ahmed was a running back for Miami that had a really nice showing last week. He had 6 carries for 40 rushing yards, 2 receptions, 31 receiving yards as well, and a touchdown. And I'm going to be looking at rookie safety Javon Holland. Javon Holland had a really nice game last week also. He had a couple of tackles. So those are going to be the players that I'm going to be watching this game for the Falcons and the Miami Dolphins. You guys let me know some players that you're going to be watching in this game also. Moving on to the third game that we have to talk about, the Indianapolis Colts taking on the Minnesota Vikings. Indianapolis defeated Carolina last Sunday 21-18, and Minnesota was destroyed by the Denver Broncos 33-6. Now for Minnesota, the whole team didn't really perform good. Even when they had a couple of their starters in, the secondary was extremely disappointing. Cameron Dantzler had a really awful game. Patrick Peterson didn't play. The majority of the starters for Minnesota didn't play, at least guys like Dalvin Cook, Justin Jefferson. But the offensive line was pitiful. The defense was pitiful. The whole entire performance from Minnesota was pitiful. Now I understand that this is going into their second week of the preseason. That was the first ever NFL game that they've had for a very long time over the last couple of months. So I understand people are going to be rusty. But if you're Mike Zimmer, you don't want to see your secondary, a secondary that struggled for pretty much the whole entire season last year, continue to struggle in a preseason matchup. You would like to see a little bit, of some good play. At least you could have something to go into, after when you go back and watch film to be proud of. But for Mike Zimmer, there wasn't really too much to be proud or happy about. The whole entire team played really terrible. And even though that is the first preseason game, they may be a little bit rusty trying to get back into football shape. Like, there was a lot of miscommunication between guys. You had guys blowing assignments, blowing coverages. So as a defensive-minded coach, it doesn't matter if you're in the regular season or the preseason, you definitely don't want to see that out of your defense. So for Minnesota, I definitely want to see how this secondary looks in this game against Indy. Now, when you look at the offense, the offensive line wasn't doing anybody any favors. As a matter of fact, the MVP of the game for Minnesota was running back Azim Rose, who had 100 rushing yards on 25 carries. And I forgot about Azim Rose. He was really good when he played for the University of Kentucky. I didn't even know that he was even in the NFL. I thought he still had another year of eligibility. He went undrafted, which was a big surprise. And it looks like Minnesota right now has a stud right now, because he was the only way that Minnesota was able to move the ball offensively last week. So you look at how Minnesota performed last week. I'm not going to overreact to it. I'm not going to say Minnesota's going to be a terrible football team this year because of how they performed in that preseason outing last week against Denver. But definitely, it doesn't matter if it's week one or not. You kind of want to see a little bit of some more encouraging play out of a position that struggled last year. So for Minnesota, the whole entire team needs to improve this game. Hopefully they will have a couple of starters playing. Don't really know for sure. But even if they don't, man, there needs to be a better showing from the backups and the depth that they have there. For Indianapolis, we still have a battle to see who's going to end up being that backup quarterback behind Carson Wentz, and who could potentially be starting week one for Indianapolis if Carson Wentz isn't ready to go. Now, Jacob Eason looked really good. He was 15 of 21, 183 pass yards. He had a really good 2-minute drive before halftime. I was really impressed with Jacob Eason. Now, he did have a couple of misfires, but overall, I felt like he right now is the clear-cut option to be that week one starter if Carson Wentz isn't ready to go. He had a really nice deep ball. He had some really nice ball placement as well, which was a big knock on him when he was coming out of Washington. And I really love watching guys with strong arms throw the football, man, because the ball comes out really nice, and when you look at Jacob Eason, I definitely feel like Jacob Eason is more than capable of being able to lead Indianapolis to a couple of wins if Carson Wentz can't start right out the gate, which I think is a big reason why, the Indianapolis isn't trying to rush Carson Wentz back from injury. I think they do have a pretty good amount of confidence in Jacob Eason. Now, Sam Ehlinger definitely overexceeded my expectations. When I watched Sam Ehlinger play for Texas, he was really polarizing, but I didn't really know if he would be a effective thrower of the football on the next level. As a matter of fact, I thought that he was probably going to end up going undrafted and having to change his position to tight end or something like that. But he definitely exceeded my expectations last week. I know he had an interception, but overall, he had a really nice game. He was 10 of 15 for 155 passing yards. He also showcased his rushing ability, 30 rushing yards on 8 carries. So, Sam Ehlinger looks really good, but Jacob Eason, to me right now, if the season had to start and Carson Wentz still wasn't cleared to play, then I most likely would roll with Jacob Eason. Left tackle is still a huge problem for Indianapolis, and it looks like they still don't have that problem solved. So preseason is kind of being used to find out who's going to end up, starting at left tackle, and nobody really showed any promise there. So it looks like Indianapolis still has a huge hole when it comes to their left tackle position that needs to, be addressed. And right now, man, if you're a Colts fan, that's probably your biggest concern. You're probably not even concerned about the quarterback position right now, because that left tackle spot is a really important position this day and age of the NFL. There's a lot of games that are won and lost based off the offensive tackle play, especially that left tackle position. So for Indianapolis, you're still trying to figure out, what's the solution there, how you're going to solve your left tackle problem. The Colts still have, on the positive side, they have a lot of depth at running back, which was showcased last week. Interesting to see what they're going to do against Minnesota. Minnesota, Their linebacker position is really strong. I think they do have a good amount of depth there. So you look at Jonathan Taylor, he didn't play, but you did see Marlon Mack, who Marlon Mack got his season cut short last year. So he had a really nice showing. I was really impressed. You definitely saw that agility. You definitely saw the ability to bounce the ball outside. You definitely did see that acceleration out of him. And Marlon Mack is really underrated. Like, a lot of people forget that Marlon Mack had, some really good seasons before the arrival of Jonathan Taylor. So I think that Marlon Mack and Jonathan Taylor definitely could end up splitting some carries this year. I think Jonathan Taylor probably gets about 60-70% of the workload, and then Marlon Mack will come in. Then you got Jordan Wilkins, who was pretty good as well. The linebacker position still has a lot of ways to go. If you're a Colts fan, I don't think you were pretty encouraged by how your linebackers played last week, considering the fact that, the run game for Carolina was clicking on all cylinders last week. So for me, my players I'm going to be watching this game for these two teams, I'm going to be watching Kellen Mond. He was 6-16, 53 pass yards, 25 rushing yards. He didn't really have a opportunity to really showcase what he was able to do per se, due to the fact that the offensive line didn't really give him that much time to throw the football. So hopefully we get to see Hopefully we get to see Kellen Mond have the opportunity to do a little bit more if he's able to get some better blocking from the offensive line. Azim Rose, I'm going to be keeping my eyes out on him. Could he end up being the backup running back on this team? Because, he was the Minnesota Vikings' only offense, if we're being honest. He was the only way that they were able to move the ball down the field. And you don't really see a lot of guys from the running back position get 25 carries in the preseason, because normally they kind of want to divide up the carries amongst the running backs so everybody gets the opportunity to shine. But Azim Rose got 25 carries. So I think that the Minnesota Vikings coaching staff is really, really high on him. And I think that maybe if he continues to perform this way, that maybe he could have somewhat of a role on this offense. Now, we don't know what that role will be, but you're giving the guy 25 carries in the preseason. You don't really see that all that often. Rookie linebacker Chaz Surratt, I want to see his development. I felt like he had a pretty nice game last week against the Denver Broncos. I think he was probably the only bright spot on that defense, in my opinion. For Indianapolis, wide receiver Tariq Blackman, 3 catches for 67 receiving yards. He has had some good training camp reviews, and we saw that come to, light last week. He had a nice grab from Sam Ehlinger. He has really good size. He has really good downfield quickness, in my opinion. Like, I think at this point, if he has another good game, he's a lock for the roster at this point. Rookie tight end Kalen Granson out of SMU also was really impressive, in my opinion, even though he didn't really have a lot of opportunities. I've heard some good things about him coming out of training camp, and he's a really good receiving tight end. He runs pretty good routes from that position. So I think that if he's able to have another good showing, that maybe he could be, having a role on this Colts offense as well. Then I'm looking at Marvell Tell, the defensive back for Indianapolis. Didn't really get to see much of him last season, but I was really impressed with what he did in this game. He was pretty good in coverage, and he also had some pretty good tackles as well. So this is it for my Indianapolis Colts versus Minnesota Vikings Week 2 preseason preview. Let me know some things that you're going to be looking for down in the comment section down below. All right, so the last game that we have to talk about, we have the New Orleans Saints taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. This game is going to be played Monday night. For New Orleans, they lost to the Baltimore Ravens 14-17, and Jacksonville Jaguars lost to the Cleveland Browns last week 23-13. Now, for the Jaguars, the highlight of the game was pretty much Tim Tebow's blocking. Tim Tebow has now been released by Jacksonville, so we're not going to see any more of him. But the offensive line didn't perform good. As a matter of fact, I was really, really disappointed with how the offensive line for Jacksonville blocked for Trevor Lawrence. Like, Trevor Lawrence out there, man, like, oh my goodness, man. Like, it was really hard to watch. And the thing about it is, like, Trevor Lawrence, you definitely understand why he was number 1 overall pick. I definitely understand why a lot of people were claiming him to be the next Andrew Luck or the next John Elway. Because when you look at him, man, despite the fact that the offensive line didn't play good, like, he was still patient. He was still going through all his reads. Literally, there was times when I saw Trevor Lawrence go to his 4th read, he literally was dropping back 1, 2, 3, 4. And there was some people who thought that Trevor Lawrence was holding on to the ball too long and things like that. But I also think that Jacksonville's play calling could have probably been a little bit better because they were trying to throw the ball deep when Trevor Lawrence was in there. And normally in the preseason, nobody really tries to, attempt a lot of downfield throws. They normally do a lot of quick passes that gets the ball to their wide receivers so the wide receivers have a chance to showcase what they can do. That's normally how most teams go about the preseason when it comes to play calling. But Jacksonville's trying to air that thing downfield, and he had a really nice throw to Marvin Jones. So when you look at Trevor Lawrence, man, I was really impressed. He wasn't holding the football too long. The offensive line just didn't give him any time, really. So for Trevor Lawrence, I'm really impressed out of him. Then, the offensive line. I need to see some improvement, man, because if Trevor Lawrence starts in this game again and the offensive line just continues to play the way they did, man, if you're Urban Meyer, man, you're going to have some things that need to be addressed because I didn't think the offensive line was going to be that bad. As a matter of fact, I thought that Jacksonville heading into this season had a pretty solid offensive line. Last year, the offensive line struggled because they had a lot of injuries, but, this year, I thought the offensive line would definitely be pretty solid. I thought this would be a top 15, top 16 unit, and I have Jacksonville winning 16 games, man. So I know this is the first preseason game, not really going to overreact, but you don't want to see your number 1 overall pick as a Jags fan get sacked as many times as he did and, be under that kind of pressure in his first preseason game. Can we at least keep this guy upright until the season starts? So for Jacksonville, man, I'm definitely a little bit disappointed with the offensive line performance last week. Definitely want to see it step up this week. The secondary also has a lot of room to grow as well. I wasn't really impressed with the secondary neither, which was another big issue that Jacksonville had, and they had a lot of injuries. So now, you have some more depth there. You have a little bit more talent. CJ Henderson played also, and I just wasn't really impressed, man. So the secondary still has a long way to go because Cleveland was dotting this team up. And I know it's just the first preseason game, but also you gotta understand that Cleveland's just a far more talented team. You don't really see a lot of preseason teams that are really good, that have the amount of depth and talent that Cleveland has, because there's a lot of guys who are backups that played in that game for Cleveland that are playing in the preseason that could be starters elsewhere. But the quarterbacks dotted this team up, man. Cleveland's backup QBs, remember, Baker Mayfield didn't play. So you had second and third string QBs who were just darting up this defense. I was really disappointed with how the secondary performed. So I want to see this secondary step up. And the secondary, I haven't really heard that many good things about it. A lot of people have been trying to tell me that, the secondary has been having its good days and its bad days. But, judging from what I saw this past weekend, the secondary has a lot more room to grow. So I want to see the secondary improve. And you're going to get the Saints team that right now is kind of, paper thin at wide receiver outside of Michael Thomas and Traquan Smith, man. You're still looking for answers there. So for Jacksonville, I think that this secondary should have a pretty good game because you're not facing, any great receivers for New Orleans. And, I'm not saying that as a knock, saying, everybody's going to be like, well, JT, the starters don't really play that much in preseason, so what do you expect? And I know that, but, New Orleans doesn't really have a lot of depth there. As a matter of fact, they only have 2 good receivers, and they're still trying to figure out who's going to be the third, fourth, and fifth option. So for Jacksonville, their secondary should definitely have a better game than what they did last week. Are we going to see more Travis Etienne? We barely saw Travis Etienne last week, so I don't know if it was just precautions, injuries, or if they just had other plans. So I want to see more Travis Etienne. I want to see him be able to show me what he can do in the open field. So maybe try to get him a little screen going, maybe line him up in slot because he has been taking some snaps at slot during training camp, during this off season. So I want to see more Travis Etienne, man. I want to see that explosiveness. I want to see him show what he can do in the open field with his acceleration and his speed. So maybe try to get him a jet sweep or something like that, but try to find a way to get him involved. I think he should at least get 10 or 11 touches, because if he's going to be a big focal point of this offense, you kind of want to get him into in-game shape. So I want to see him at least get 12 touches in this game. We also don't know who is tight end 1. Now, we know that they have a blocking tight end, but Urban Meyer, his offense also needs a receiving tight end. And as of right now, I don't really know who's the clear-cut receiving option. So you guys can tell me down in the comment section down below who you guys think is leading the tight end battle for Jacksonville. Maybe James O'Shaughnessy, maybe. Don't really know for real. Now, for New Orleans, we have the starting quarterback job up for grabs between Jameis Winston and Taysom Hill. Now, honestly, even though I'm a Jameis Winston fan, I gotta say, Jameis Winston right now looks like he should be QB1. And Sean Payton was asked about the quarterback battle going on after the game, but he didn't want to talk about it because the team had 6 turnovers, and I understand that you had 3 interceptions and you had 3 fumbles, so I understand why he doesn't want to commit to a quarterback right now. He's probably going to try to string this out, but I think after this game, we should have a pretty clear indicator of who's going to be QB1, and I most likely think that it's going to be Jameis Winston. Taysom Hill, looked like Taysom Hill. You definitely didn't really see the good arm strength. He has like a below average to average arm. I wasn't really that impressed. He had an interception. He was 8 of 12. He had some okay plays, but overall, I feel like Jameis Winston looked like the more polished QB. I definitely saw a Jameis Winston that definitely looked really confident going in. I saw a Jameis Winston that led a really good drive. He had a nice touchdown pass. So when I look at Jameis Winston, he's the clear QB1 on the team as of right now. And everybody's saying, well, Taysom Hill offers him a little bit more, but Jameis Winston right now is just the best QB overall, in my opinion. And I think we're going to see that in this game as well. Now, the wide receiver depth, still is a concern. You're still trying to figure out who's going to be your third, fourth options. But Jawan Johnson had a pretty nice showing. He had 2 grabs for 71 receiving yards. Marquez Callaway, Lil Jordan Humphrey. Still want to see what those guys are going to do against the Jacksonville Jaguars secondary that is still struggling. Rookie corner, Paulson Adebo looks like the clear cornerback 2 on this team. He was really good. And you definitely see the size and athleticism come on to display. If he was able to play last year for Stanford, he probably could have won the second or first round, man, because he was really good. So if you're a Saints fan, you're definitely really excited about Paulson Adebo. I want to see what he does in this game also, because he looks like the best cornerback outside of Marshawn Lattimore. I think he can have a really good rookie season. He was really great in that preseason matchup last week against Baltimore. So players I'm going to be watching for these 2 teams. Tavon Austin. Remember Tavon Austin? I feel like after he got drafted by the Rams, I haven't heard anything from him. He was one of the most excited college football players that I watched from this past decade. So when you look at him, he had 4 catches for 52 receiving yards and a touchdown. I definitely feel like he could end up making a roster because I feel like Urban Meyer wants some wide receivers who can do some things with the ball in space. And you look at Tavon Austin, he definitely counts for that category. And I think that he fits really well in Urban Meyer's offense. For Urban Meyer, I think he can properly utilize Tavon Austin in ways that other teams haven't really been able to. I feel like a lot of teams, they got Tavon Austin, but they didn't really do anything that made him the dynamic player that he was coming into the draft years and years ago. So for him, I think, you get him the ball in space, I think he'd be a really good slot receiver in Urban Meyer's offense. So I want to see what he does in this game, if he can have an encore performance. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to see more of Travis Etienne. I want to see him at least get 10 or 12 touches in this game. You got linebacker Shaq Quarterman, who had a really good game last week. I want to see how he replicates that performance this week against the New Orleans Saints. Now, halfback Tony Jones Jr. for New Orleans. I don't know who the heck this guy was before last week, but boy, this guy is really fun to watch. This man is a freight train. He was running guys over. He was mauling guys. Really impressed with what I saw to him last week. 82 rushing yards and a touchdown. So it's going to be interesting to see if he's going to be able to get that third running back spot, because we know about Alvin Kamara, we know about Latavius Murray. So could he end up having that third spot on the roster? Then Kevin White. The Saints just signed Kevin White not too long ago. He was brought in on the tryout Tuesday. He performed really well. So I don't know if he's going to be able to play in this game or not, but there's guys who get brought off the street all the time in preseason. There's guys who are brought like 2 days for a preseason game that they just throw in there. So I want to see Kevin White, if he plays this game, man, like, is he going to show everybody why he was the first round pick from a couple of years ago? And Kevin White, man, hasn't really been able to stay on the field, battled through injuries. But overall, man, like, I'm really excited about Kevin White. Like, anytime I see a team sign Kevin White, I got to look for him, okay? Like, I want to see just a little bit. I want to see this guy have success. Honestly, that's why I'm paying close attention to him. So I just want to see Kevin White have success, man. Whether that be the regular season, the preseason, I'm just hoping that Kevin White's able to have a spot on this team, because I see why people keep bringing in Kevin White, because obviously, you have that athleticism, you have the size, so it's obviously something there if teams keep on bringing him in, and hopefully the New Orleans Saints could be that team that, if he's able to stay healthy, that maybe could unlock Kevin White's full potential that we have yet to be shown. So this is it for my Jacksonville Jaguars versus New Orleans Saints Week 2 NFL preseason preview. Let me know some players that you're going to be watching, some things that you're going to be watching also down in the comment section down below. And thanks for listening to this episode of the JT Sports Podcast. I'll be trying to drop one more episode before I leave for college on Friday. Probably try to get that out tomorrow. And that probably much will be my last episode for the next couple of days. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys shortly with another episode of the JT Sports Podcast.